Kyle here from All Media Reviews. Here today, I got some stuff in the works. 1987 Albums of the Year. It's hopefully not that far away. I'm getting pretty close to being able to do that. And I know the timing and the pace has been so much slower. I really want to pick it up, but it's just, things happen and you got other things I want to do. So, I don't know. But it should be coming soon. Maybe today or tomorrow. Or Thursday at the latest. Whatever. But instead I'm going to do a video that I've sort of alluded to. I've been alluding to two videos I've been meaning to do in the last few months. One being the Minnesota Prog list, album list or something like that. But that's not going to be today. That will be hopefully soon. Maybe next week. I'm not sure. But the other one is, you could say, a list of artists I don't talk about, I don't like, I don't care about, or what I don't know if the word hate is the right word, but I that a lot of people like that whatever, that surprisingly I don't like, or I don't care for, or I'm surprised, or just there's different things. So anyway, this is not a short list, and it could be a part one of a series potentially, because there's a lot of names. I made a list on Rate Your Music. It was like 15 years. It was one of the first years I was on Rate Your Music. If I have but it's got 1,948 views, but only 4 parts. I guess I could give one myself. I call it an artist I don't get, overrated among other things. And I made a follow-up list too. But this was, yeah. But, most of these still are intact. There's a couple names that might not be in this list now. But anyway, so let's just go over this. It's not in any real order. Not really. I just started making them. I didn't alphabetize it, so it's fine. So anyway, first is Big Big Train. I don't think they're terrible. I just don't find the reason. They're one of way too many bands I've heard that basically sound overtly derivative of the Gabriel Genesis, or even Genesis. So, as much as it has people that I like, Nick DiVirgilio, I've never been able to get into them. Hawken, band that just kind of blew up about 15 years ago among Dream Theater fans and hasn't stopped. I just think they come across as basically another one of dozens, if not hundreds, of bands that want to sound like Dream Theater. Now, they do other things, I guess, but I listened to The Mountain once a few years ago, and it doesn't do anything for me. Vocal style, whatever. Anyway. Circa Survive, who I initially liked for about a week or two. They had a strong association with Dredge and with some other bands, The Deer Hunter. It didn't hit me how much Anthony Green's voice I could not stand, and that was primarily the reason. I also didn't... Some of their music was just sort of okay, but the vocals are just impossible to ignore, and he sounds super young. So I know people love them, but they're not for me. Radiohead, that's probably the biggest among all these, like, all the bands on this list that I feel like I should like. In some ways I would want to like, but the biggest reason is Tom York's vocals. He just sounds like he's high, very nasal, like too nasal, and their music is just light at points. They have some interesting bits at points, and they're just super hyped, super overhyped. Their influence I would never deny, and I totally feel like my taste owes a lot to them. However, their music itself, and largely because Tom York's voice, that's not the only reason, like I said, but their music lacks punch. You compare Muse to them, and Muse always had more, cojones, more punch, more balls, they wrote more in-your-face riffs, and they had a better kind of, energy on a lot of their sound. I know that the similarities were there, but I think it got exaggerated. The first Muse album, I suppose, Muscle Museum to some degree. I think actually Jeff Buckley and later Queen are bigger influence on Muse, but Radiohead, they influenced so many bands I like, that I love, but I just can't. I've never been able to get into them. So another one is Symphony X. I bought the CD. Tried to like them. I didn't really get the ones before. This is the one that most people consider their best. The New Mythology Suite from the year 2000. It's cheesy power metal to me. It sounds way too much. The lyrics are cheesy. I mean, it's about Greek mythology mostly. Russell Allen's vocals do nothing for me, really. Just not much. Technically, is he a bad singer? No, I don't find him. I just find his kind of his style, his tone, his sort of vibrato. It's cheese. It get to be way too cheesy. And I found initially I kind of found this band a little cheesy, but they grew on me. And I think Shadow Gallery has done music that's kind of like Symphony X, but they don't do power metal. I don't hear the power metal element in their sound, whereas this comes across way too much like power metal. I know that they're prog metal, whatever. Shadow and the vocals, they grew on me, and they totally work, and the harmonies and stuff. R.I.P. Mike Baker and everything. So that's kind of one of my big responses to Symphony X. I know some people don't like Symphony X, but they like that song, The Odyssey, which I listened to it once and thought it was okay. But Arion, along the same lines, super cheesy. And as I've said many times, to me, what Arion is, Arjun Lucassen, is like, it pretty much is like We Are the World with prog names, and it's all melodramatic and theatrical. And I feel like with doing music that's based on concepts and stories and characters, it can't be like dialogue from a play. If it comes across that way, it gets way too cheesy and melodramatic, and I just kind of, I just feel like it's way too over the top. And I know they have, I don't know how many albums Arion has, probably like 10 maybe. So there might be one or two records I might be able to get past that, but I just find that the songwriting and sort of the whole premise just gets to be too cheesy. And I feel like also Never Ending White Lights, while there's a lot of differences in the approach, has taken a similar idea of using different singers and just done it the song for the song. The songs unite in sort of a concept, but it's not theatrical or melodramatic for the most part, anyway. So Never Ending White Lights does that kind of thing, but in a much different, better way to me. So Moon Safari, who was really buzzed about last year in the prog scene and then back in like the 2000s, I just find them, like having listened to that record from last year, most of it is too plasticky and reminds me too much of like 80s, like a lot of 80s Yes and Asia and that kind of thing, Saga and that kind of, it just sounds too plasticky. It just, oh man, it's just, people love it, their vocal harmonies and all this stuff. I just mostly, I know my friend John used to talk about how they were like the Flower Kings. So the Flower Kings, I like some of their music, but a lot of it kind of has worn thin with me, and I'm not that into either. But I would still rather listen to the Flower Kings over Moon Safari in most cases. Baragos, their record from last year that people were getting into, some people, they're big among the fans of the Deer Hunter, of course. The production was really poor at points on that. The cymbals were clipping. And I can't ignore the fact they've had, even though the member, I guess, isn't in the band anymore, they've had some issues with a former member and some legal issues. And so they can't fully ignore that kind of that issue. So it kind of gave me another kind of concern about getting into them as a band. Because on paper, they have some music that I like. It's kind of wacky, almost like, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the Deer Hunter, of course, is one influence. You could say Mr. Bungle, or there's some other bands you could compare them to some degree. More on Police, maybe, but anyway. Baragos is definitely one that I don't get. I'm not into. Neil Morris / the Neil Morris Band, especially Neil Morris, but for one thing, the Christian element, I bought Testimony when it came out. I think I have the CD somewhere around here still. Maybe I sold it. I can't remember. And the Christian part just destroyed it for me. And I love the Neil Morris Spock's beard. And And even when they started doing the Neil Moore's band, I mean, he strayed away from some of the Christian elements, but it was still there. And so I'm Jewish. I don't want to think about, in most cases, Jesus preaching. Now, there's some bands that are sort of considered Christian, even though I don't really think they are, that I like Falling Up to some degree. And, you know, King's X and Mute Math have been called in The Reign of Kindo and even Dirtpa Robbins. It's not in your face. I feel like with Neil Morris, you can't ignore it. But even beyond the Christian element, I kind of, his style has kind of worn thin to me in that I feel like I've heard a lot of the same ideas, and most of the music that Neil Morris does sounds like the stuff he's done previously, which is fine. That's, you know, people love him. That's what they hope to hear. I've kind of, I mean, I love the first two Transatlantic albums and those Neil Morris Spock Spirit albums. That's kind of all I really need at this point. I don't know. So, Asia, just like Moon Safari, but it's from the 80s. Most of Asia sounds way too plasticky to me. The first album has a few, I mean, of course, everyone's heard The Heat of the Moment and a couple of the other singles, but I thought I was going to get into them, and, you know, despite the fact that it's Steve Howe, the first couple of records, and John Wetton, on paper, the people I like in Asia, of course, but that doesn't necessarily mean their music I'm going to like. And then the John Payne era, I want nothing to do. And the same thing has, to some degree, with Saga, as I mentioned them earlier. IQ, love Marillion, but the neo-prog sound has always been very kind of derivative of a sort of like, it's like AOR prog. I know that IQ are kind of trying to remake Genesis to some degree, although my friend John used to describe them and compare them more to like Triumph. I can hear that. I feel like I'm listening to sort of 80s computer game music at points sometimes, and there's not enough. And then some of the vocals, Peter Nichols' vocals, sound overtly like Peter Gabriel almost too much. And my friends are like, I can't believe you haven't gotten an IQ. And people love IQ, you know. I just can't. And most of the quote-unquote neo-prog, I liked a little bit of, what was the band? Arena. Arena's the one band from that style that, I mean, 12th Night I haven't heard enough of. Palace, and Pendragon I listened to. I even bought a bootleg from them, and even though they did that Pure record, was supposed to be different about 15 years ago, you know, most neo-prog rock, and IQ included, Marillion is isolated to me, and they're different, and especially you consider the later Fish stuff, and then, of course, when Fish left, they don't resemble that neo-prog sound at all. So, you know, neo-prog is a style that I wanted to like. I started to like band of Louvatar. There's a lot of bands that did it. It's like they have moments, but as a whole, I can't fully. It doesn't grab me. As a whole, just, you know, Marillion are an exception. I mean, they had Fish was a very distinct singer. That none of these other bands had singers that were as distinct and sort of, you know, and just some of it's just writing melodic poppy elements, and I don't know. Caligula's Horse, prog metal. They sound like so many other prog metal bands, and also the name of the band itself has always been an issue for me. I just think of that, you know, it's like an adult film from the 70s. I don't want to think about, you know, Greek mythology and adult films from the 70s when I'm hearing your band. It just sounds very cheesy. And most prog metal in general over the last 15 years I have not been into anyway. So, but it's you know, the recipe prog metal, Dream Theater Worship for the most part, from my impression when I've heard them. The Flaming Lips, yeah, I don't like Wayne Coyne's voice. The hipsters like them. They should be part of the, you know, the progressive art rock, you know, family or whatever. And they might sort of on paper fit that from a style. They channeled Pink Floyd. They did. It's like freak folk. It's like freak folk trying to do, you know, art rock, or, you know. I don't find them that amazing. I just don't find that what they have done that great. Maybe I haven't heard the right song, but when I've heard, they have like these kind of bass lines that are influenced by Chris Squire. I don't know. Neutral Milk Hotel, I liked them for maybe a couple weeks back in the mid-2000s, and then I just got completely repulsed by their singer's voice. Just like Tom York, That wasn't the only reason. I'm trying to pull that up. That wasn't the only reason why I didn't. Jeff Mangum, I think his name is. Yeah, that I just kind of blew them off, and I love the Apples and Stereo Times. You know, they worked. You know, Robert Schneider worked with them and everything, but it's nasal and it's repulsive and it's kitschy. It's just no. Neutral Milk Hotel. Sorry, and the name itself. While I didn't hate it right away, grew to just be very grating to even like think about the name and then think about the way that he sings and the style that kind of. It's almost it's a similar deal to Radiohead in some way. I feel like the singer is high and is acting silly and high at the same time, and it's terrible. So another vocal issue. A lot of these bands are based on the vocals, sadly. Joanna Newsom, she's a talented musician, I guess you could say, and she kind of does her own thing, but her vocals sound like a high-pitched mouse. I don't want to hear a high-pitched mouse sing. And I know, Andy Samberg's married to her, and he's out kicking his coverage because she could be a model. I mean, that's how attractive she always comes across. But her music itself, timbre, of course, Timbre Serpsey, Brooke Wagner, done a similar kind of classically or Baroque or chamber singer-songwriter style, much more to my taste and to stomach. Their vocals don't repulse me in the least. But, I mean, she did these 2 epic concept albums. She uses the harp and stuff. I like Timbre's harp arrangement. I mean, Timbre did an epic concept album herself, but Joanna Newsom and me, I wanted to like her, and I cannot stand those mousy vocals. It's like the most high-pitched thing. Fleet Foxes, yeah, I liked them for a few weeks. I liked their first EP, really. But then it just got to be just repulsive. They got super hyped. And then a band I love more, Local Natives or Calvo Rest, got compared to them. And it's just, they were everywhere. And it just got to be hipster, force-fed hipster music. And it's Americana, and they weren't even that progressive, really. But don't like them. Animal Collective, Strawberry Jam I thought was okay. Then suddenly they put out Merriweather Post Pavilion, and you couldn't avoid it. And it's just, these guys are, the modern day Beach Boys. There's never been a band that channeled the Beach Boys influence better. And that one track that was just played constantly on different. It wasn't just our local, National Public Radio field at the Current. It was, Animal Collective got to be super annoying. They're they're not even weird. They're just annoying and repulsive, and people need to forget about them. And actually, it's kind of nice because Animal Collective, that was their peak. That was 2000. I think it was 2008. I think it was 2008. It was 2008 or 2009. I think 2009 actually. They have not been, talked about. It's like they're done. I mean, they're still, I guess, a band, but I know there's like this mystique or mysterious element to them. Like, they have like Panda Bear's one of the members. It's not his real name. It's almost like a Daft Punk thing. But no, I don't like Animal Collective and the way they kind of get the whole Brian Wilson Beach Boys compared. They sound like they're on drugs, and their vocal harmonies have become annoying. I don't think they're very good singers. I don't think their tone, their vocal lines are repulsive, and it's just. They're a better band. The Deer Hunter channels the Beach Boys. I take Panic at the Disco, at least the one album, Pretty Odd, over anything that Animal Collective has done. Anyway. Band, not the Deer Hunter, but Deer Hunter, one word. Bradford Cox, of course, he came out around the same time as the DEAR, the Deer Hunter. Not very good. I mean, I guess I could say the music itself isn't awful. I mean, compared to some of these bands, I would probably listen to their music over Deer Hunter's music over some of these bands, probably. But it's just like electronic, sort of indie post-hard. I mean, it's not even post-hardcore really. But the name itself, and it's like been this sort of refusal to like, well, no, the Deer Hunter should change their name. So. Yeah, I mean, Deer Hunter is not a band that's like, or it's like a solo project, really. but among the Deer Hunter, I'm sure there are some fans of the Deer Hunter that like Deer Hunter, but not for me. Arcade Fire. They don't have. I've never heard any of their songs that have like these amazing moments. I know that a lot of bands I like both are influenced or have been compared to them, like the Family Crest or a lot of the chamber rock stuff. I think the Polyphonic Spree has done this much better, but Arcade Fire got to be huge. Their vocals are just kind of vanilla. They're better vocals than some of these. I'd rather listen to their singers than like Tom York or Joanna Newsom, but their vocals are still vanilla. And they've been super hipster. Like the hipsters have hyped them up. You know, I know they won the Grammy and everything. And Geddy Lee, of course, talked about them. It was almost 20 years ago. I'd never heard of them. But I find them overrated, and I don't really find... They've never put out a song I was blown away by. That song, was it Sprawl? Was okay. It sounded a lot like Blondie. But, no, they're not prog. They're not, you know, again, they would fit under the progressive art rock, maybe, like the Flaming Lips, but I just feel like their music just doesn't have enough for me, and I don't understand why people worship it. But I'll give them slight amount of credit, like Radiohead, in that they probably influenced music I liked, especially using some other, you know, chamber instrumentation, stuff like that, like violins. But KO Dot, well, I really love Maudlin of the Well. I got the box set right here. Leaving Your Body Map in Bath. Love all the Maudlin of the Well. I just find their music mostly boring. I feel like they lack, most of the albums, most of their music lacks metal. There's been a couple they brought some metal back. No, it changed when they went over to John Zorn's label and everything like that, and it became sort of, I mean, you could call it post-rock, but it was more just like avant-garde experiment. I mean, there are points, there's also been KO Dot albums where Toby's singing and he's like really close to the mic and he's swallowing, it's just repulsive to me. But, you know, I like parts of the first record because, you know, they took Choirs of the Eye as like sort of basically like would have been a Maudlin of the Well album. But parts of it meanders and just, I got bored. Like a lot of post-rock, even though it doesn't sound like traditional post-rock. It was more like a John Zorn or Henry Cow or something like that, and that's partly my issue with it, so. Tool, well, you know, on paper I like some parts of their music, and they like Radiohead and Arcade Fire. They influence a lot of bands I love. They used to give me headaches. I used to get headaches frequently. And I like their cover of No Quarter by Zeppelin. Some of it is just too, like, over the head, beating a dead horse, like, the riffs. And with Maynard's vocal style, it's kind of, the blend gets to be too much. As much as I like metal, I like some extreme metal, and some of the heavier progressive art rock stuff draw largely on Tool. It gets to be just too much of a droning thing, and a lot of it sounds similar to me. As much as a lot of their fan base would probably be like scoffing at that. It's like, well, you compare Anima and Undertow to 10,000 Days or the last record. I like parts of Lateralis, but again, I used to get headaches, and it's just, again, they influence bands I like. I respect them. If they got in the Rock Hall, that would be fine. I would understand that, but I'm not really a fan. The Explosions in the Sky, they're a one-note derivative style band. It's just the same kind of meandering post-rock that just... It's almost... The term post-rock, even though they weren't the first band, it's kind of defined it in some ways. And there's like hundreds of bands that have done the same kind of thing. Like, you know, This Will Destroy You. Although I actually think This Will Destroy You I would listen to over them. I saw them live a couple times and thought they were okay. But Explosions in the Sky are just boring to me. They're just boring and repetitive. The Pineapple Thief, way too much of a Radiohead influence. They have this one song called The World I Always Dreamed Of. That is great. The outro is phenomenal. It's very, it's just super sublime, that the string arrangement. Other than that, everything time I've heard the Pineapple Thief, they sound way too much like Radiohead. And then people said like they're like Porcupine Tree. Well, I don't necessarily want to hear a band that sounds exactly like Porcupine Tree either. Although Abigail's Ghost is a band that sounds exactly like Porcupine Tree. They're worse, but the Radiohead element and the vocal style. I mean, everything occasionally have a song or two that sounds like Tom York singing. So I mean, it's like taking that kind of stuff, like most everything doesn't, and basically like almost every song, the vocal style reminds me. Now you could say Doves, some of the Britpop, some of the bands I do like. I don't know. It just the Pineapple Thief, they've always kind of been a little too much like Radiohead and a little too vanilla for me. Foo Fighters, mediocre, and I'm not a fan of Dave Grohl. Pretty much anything. I don't like his voice. There's nothing amazing, nothing unique about the Foo Fighters. They influence some bands I like, I guess you could say. Even like Doves, they have a couple of songs that kind of sound like Foo Fighters, and like Biffy Clyro. It's a band I like that has some songs that sound kind of like Foo Fighters. They're just mad, and everyone loves Dave Grohl, and it's like, fine, but I don't care for his music, and I don't really find his personality that amazing. I don't just like think he's awful. I don't find him engaging, and I don't find his music engaging. And you could just say along the same lines, Nirvana, as my friend John, Nevermind is not the greatest album of all time, and Kurt Cobain's got an annoying voice, and very whiny. It's just, I like Nirvana. I was supposed to like them because they were a band of my generation in the early 90s when I was in high school, and they just became more and more annoying. The Smiths, Morrissey is annoying. I don't think they're terrible, but I find his vocals repulsive, and their music is just, it sounds like mixture of post-punk, new wave, and it's just sort of, and it's cool to like the Smiths. Well, they were amazing. They were the most mind-blowing thing ever. They're so underrated. I don't find that. Now, go back a couple decades, and the Velvet Underground is the same situation. I don't find the Velvet Underground mind-blowing or the most, sort of underrated, underappreciated, super creative band of all time. Art rock. No. Nico and no. Even though Jimmy Necco, ours covered Femme Fatale and everything, I don't care for them. Velvet Underground, annoying. Their albums, you see them always plastered on these lists. It's like the most genius record. No, sorry. Not for me. The Velvet okay, Pixies. I like that song, Where Is My Mind? That's about it. It was the end of that one the show, the 4400, they played that. Other than that, I know they had a big influence on Nirvana, so, go figure. People say, oh, they're the most underrated band. They should be in the Rock Hall and all this stuff. Mudhoney, okay, like, they invented grunge, even though I still contend King's X, while they don't sound as much grunge as maybe Mudhoney, really, had as much, if not a larger impact on the detune, the drop detuning. The Mudhoney fans is like, well, no, and King's X actually predate Mudhoney, is the truth. I don't know if the actual drop detuning they did, but, no, I don't find, even though I'm not that into grunge, but people like to credit Mudhoney as like the first grunge band, and the whole King's X Mudhoney thing, which is kind of stupid, I still think is to a degree valid to not, these people that like to worship Mudhoney as the first band. It's like, you can't ignore King's X. If you're ignoring King's X, then you're not informed. You have an uninformed take on that. Taylor Swift, there's really nothing special about her music, and I pretty much have contended that in a decade or 2 decades, people are not going to be, there aren't going to be like Taylor Swift cover bands. They're not going to be, like feeling her influence. I can't even name more than like 1 or 2 of her songs, and is she awful? No. Is she like repulsive to listen to? Well, maybe not. It's just there's nothing special about her yet. She's anointed as the most famous musician in the world and the biggest musician of her generation, and which is just sad. Comparing her to Prince or Michael Jackson or the Beatles or any of these, Madonna even, I would say Britney Spears is, over time, will be considered more iconic than her in terms of her songs, her music. Maybe not necessarily as a name and a sort of a known entity, because she's kind of dominated the last, at least 5 years. But I think Beyonce, I'm not huge into Beyonce. Beyonce, over time, may actually, in 20 or 30 years, we'll be thinking of this is the era of Beyonce, not Taylor Swift from a musical standpoint. At least she has single ladies. They sing that at weddings. And she was in Destiny's Child, so anyway. Kamasi Washington, he ain't fusion, and the hipsters were just trying to latch onto him like, we love jazz now. No, Epic is a waste of time. You know, is he a bad musician? No, but there are jazz artists that are so much better. I have no interest really in Kamasi Washington at this point. Of Montreal, I'd like to like them. Apes and Androids, of course, has been, the comparison is a little bit like that, but Kevin Barnes' voice is annoying. It's much like Wayne Coyne from Flaming Lips or Tom York or John, you know, hard to stomach his vocal style. They have too many albums too. They're just, if you were going to get into Of Montreal, they have like 17 albums. It's like Motorpsycho or now King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. So yeah, I mean, they were on Elephant Six just like Apples in Stereo and Neutral Milk Hotel, although and Olivia Tremor Control, of course. I would listen to them over listening to Neutral Milk Hotel, I guess, but they had that one album like the Satanic Panic or whatever. I don't know. It's like, based on my love of Apes and Androids, I guess they could be given a stay of execution because there might be some music in there given I'd like to find the most electronic stuff they've done, but I just think that especially the vocal style is just what holds them back like a lot of these bands, no matter how great the music is. Yeasayer, hipster, no. Local Natives, awesome. Annuals, awesome. You know, Yeasayer and Vampire Weekend as well. Way too kitschy. And I mean, having listening there, the comparison to Paul Simon and Graceland, have listened to Graceland recently. I'm not even as into that album, so why would I even be into Vampire Weekend? I do not like Vampire Weekend. Hipsters like to just, that band's grown in stature, whereas a band like Annuals isn't even around anymore. I guess you could also throw Grizzly Bear, although I don't think they're on this list. And Grizzly Bear, I guess I've kind of calmed down. I know Kimber covered one of their songs. Lana Del Rey, no. Again, she has a song about Jimmy Necco. Jimmy opened for her. I don't like her. I don't find her mind-blowing. I know she's a Jeff Buckley fan. So I like her influences, but her music itself is nothing special. She's a little bit like Taylor Swift, although I'd probably listen to her over Taylor Swift. But hipsters love her, and I just don't find her amazing. I mean, she's not super annoying, but she's just not unique. And she has a song called Jimmy Necco, and that's the sad thing is that people know that song more than any of ours or Jimmy's music, which is just pathetic. Beach House, I would have had on this list as I mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention that. The hipsters love to pimp them, that album Teen Dream. I really just found them really annoying psych rock, or psych pop. Indie psych, whatever. Then Jake Rude played something from them on one of his streams a couple years ago, and I was actually kind of really getting into it. So Beach House was on this list. I don't know if they really belong on this list anymore. I don't know. The jury's still out on them. Okay, The World is a Beautiful Place, and I'm no longer afraid to die. First and foremost, like Neutral Milk Hotel or like Caligula's Horse, way too repulsive of a name. You could call them The World is a Beautiful Place. Even that's too much. And then they had this massive, like, feminist agenda with their lyrics and some of their fans I was reading online. And even though I know they were, like, diving into prog, they almost would be like an Empire band, like a progressive art rock band. But, no, they just changed their name, and I might consider checking your music out again. I don't think I can. Portugal the Man came across as basically derivative of the Mars Volta, and then they got bigger and bigger. They opened for Dredge twice. Now they're a much bigger band than Dredge, which is sad, just like Circus Survive. But yeah, they, to me, were just one of dozens of kind of the Mars Volta sort of copycat bands. Now, I guess they kind of evolved to being a little different than that, more like a blues rock band purely. I don't know. But, yeah, my cat wants to say hello or wants to get involved. Yeah, he might like some of these bands more than me. Your claws are getting on me. Churches, Aerogrum, members of Aerogrum who formed, like, they did a one-off project after Aerogrum broke up, the Scottish band. But then Churches, even though I don't hate the singer, Churches got to be pretty big, and it's like Aerogrum never got any credit, and I love Aerogrum much better. Aerogrum were prog, Churches were not. Progressive art rock. Fun, much like Churches. One or two members of Anathello formed Fun with the guy from the Format, and then they ended up winning Grammys and stuff like that. Anathello were awesome, were brilliant, but they weren't as accessible, I guess, You know, and of course, Janelle Monáe's on the one song, which you can't really hear her. She's listed as being featured on that song, was it Tonight or what? I forget the name of it. No, I don't like Fun with a Period. Okay, so Idola, no. They had like a gent element. I didn't care for them. They had Mew element. Astronaut as well. Again, they're taking like sort of prog metal or metal and gent and then combining it with Mew. Vola, basically those three bands I'd lump in together, even though they probably all sound quite different between Idola, Astronaut, and Vola. Astronaut is probably the one I probably could get into, but I don't know. I love Mew, and there's certain bands like Team Me and Days Veil, and there's a few others that have a Mew influence or an element, Jazz Kamikaze. These bands just don't do anything. I don't like some extreme metal combined with Mew. I mean, Time of Orchids. Time of Orchids is the one exception, which they're like Maudlin Llewellyn, but like doing Maudlin Llewellyn stuff without the extreme vocals, but actually doing things better than K.O. Dot. Whereas these bands, Astronaut, Idola, and Vola, the combination doesn't work for me. It never has, at least at this point. Postal Service, Death Cab for Cutie, again, I don't like Ben Gibbard's voice. I know he wrote a song for the Monkees, of course. Me and Magdalena. You know, in Postal Service, there was one comparison, the Disassociates got compared to them, but mostly because I don't care for Ben Gibbard's voice. But again, the hipsters like to just kiss the ass of this band. I just don't hear. I know that Chroma Key was compared to them at one point, Death Cab for Cutie. Richelieu, that's a case where they sound way too much like Tool. And there's several other bands, but there's people that love Richelieu. People that love Carnival, love Fair to Midland. They love Richelieu to no end. They think Richelieu are genius. I just hear basically a Tool copycat band, and I don't like Tool, so. And let's see here. And the last one on this list just came up today. The band Swans. Oh my god, I hate this band. They have a hipster vibe. I know they've been around since like the early 80s. They're like one of the generators of post-rock, you could maybe say. It's wall of sound trash. It's kind of like doing what Godspeed has done. Like this, they have these builds, but instead of actually having a climax with these strings and very kind of with clarity and harmonies and everything, it's just a wall of sound. It's just, and when they do vocals, I don't like, the guy's got a terrible voice. I mean, is he as bad as like Joanna Newsom? Maybe not. He sounds a little bit like the guy from, like, I'm gonna say not Wayne Coyne, the guy from, not Built to Spill, the Hold Steady. Nasal, and it's Smug's vocal style. Now, you could say, well, even Squid's vocals were a little bit like that when I first heard them. I don't anticipate, I know that Swans has they have like 15 albums or something, and they have different eras. I just think those albums, To Be Kind and The Seer, are just, oh my god, most genius thing ever. Listen to how brilliant this is. We got all these mashups. It's just breathtaking. No, it's not. It's annoying. It's super annoying. And it's just a wall of sound, and it's a waste of time. There's some of the Godspeed stuff that goes into drone that I don't like either. But there's no, to me, I've never heard any of Swan's music that had any payoff whatsoever. And then they get these hipsters like to kiss their ass and preach them to people, and it's like, no, To Be Kind is not the 73rd best album of all time. It's maybe the 73rd worst album of all time. I don't fathom. I know there are people in the prog scene like them, and, you know, I don't know how much chamber instrumentation they've used. No, and even just the whole vibe about the smugness and sort of conceited element to their fan base, especially on Rate Your Music, I have really very, very, very much little to no interest to ever really checking their music out. I'll list a couple of names that I like, small amounts of music, like I include the Flower Kings on there. I saw them live once. Riverside, I like ADHD, but people love them. I don't know. To me, Pure Reason Revolution came up around the same time, and I loved a lot more. You know, I just find that they're like Arcade Fire. There's something kind of, they've always had like lack of punch, lack of, like, ADHD had that. I like moments of that record, Love, Fear, and the Time Machine, you know, and it's sad that Peter Grzinski passed away and everything, but I just, it's more of the fact that, like Symphoniac, a lot of these bands frequently get mentioned and praised, and it's like, oh, I'm excited for this album. they've always underwhelmed me. Voivod and Cave In. Voivod, I like a couple of their records. I have a couple of them, but I saw them with Vector. Overall, I compare in the whole history of prog metal, Voivod, while they were important to some degree and they were maybe lesser known than some of the bands because they were in Canada, I just don't find they've ever had any like fantastic. I know they work with Terry Brown on, was it Angel Rad, and I think they should be better than they are given the love and appreciation that other people have for them. And Cave In, you know, a band that a lot of people do praise and everything, and I don't like inherently hate their music. Again, I've heard a few songs I liked, but I've never. The Caddisfly fans were really into them. They were, and then other people have talked about how that, you know, you should love them, and it's, you know, they have moments, but they lack. You know, they have never blown me away. You know, I'd rather listen to Incubus actually, even though I don't love a lot of Incubus. Incubus has the Odyssey Suite and some other things that were more interesting to me. So that's the sort of band artist list that I don't like, don't get, I don't find worth my time, and have never done anything for me. They're not my cup of tea. You may, I mean, I'm not, I don't feel bad, you know, if people love these bands for a reason, more power to them to some degree. I just don't like being force-fed some of it, and I guess it's not their fault, it's sort of my own sort of mental capacity just to kind of be able to ignore them, and that's why I don't do videos like this very much. But, you know, the fact is they exist, and people wonder, why don't you talk about this band? Why don't you talk about this band? Why? I mean, I haven't had a lot of that because there's not that much following this channel, but, you know, I've had a few people have made comments, or they just suggest a band to me and they wonder, you know, or like why I haven't talked about it, and that's kind of why. So anyway, but thank you for watching, and see you next time.